Climate change is now happening due to a 12,000-year cycle of cataclysms. We are not talking about global warming, supposedly caused by human activity. We are talking about the destruction of the planet from within and the death of all life on it. This is not a joke and not a script for a new disaster movie. It is already happening right before our eyes. Why do those who should have been the first to warn us of the impending doom keep silent? The scientists whom we entrusted with the responsibility of warning us of the disaster are divided. Instead of figuring out the real causes, they fight against each other. Some argue that climate change is caused by human activity, namely, the emission of CO2 into the atmosphere due to the burning of hydrocarbon fuels. In their opinion, this is the reason why the climate situation is catastrophically worsening. Other scientists believe that modern climate change has nothing to do with human activity. It is caused by normal variations in natural factors, just as it always happens in nature. And so there is nothing unusual about climate change on the planet right now. Yet, both groups of scientists are blind. They lack complete information and are very much mistaken. The climate is changing critically. Deaths and destruction are covering more and more territories every day. But it is not because of humanity. It is time for us to speak frankly.
Why do you intimidate people and make up some scary stories? The climate has always changed for natural reasons, and there's no catastrophe.
This morning as firefighters try to
just pull over, Jordy!
And there's no catastrophe.
Is a person who wakes you up by knocking at the door when your house is on fire, scaring or saving you. And if it's not just your house that is on fire, but the whole planet, should you be warned about that? What is happening on the planet right now is abnormal for the last 11,000 years. Let's face the facts. Over the entire millennium, the planet hasn't experienced such a drastic climate change as in the last 30 years of our lives. Overall ocean heating has increased by 450% in the last 30 years. Evidence of heating of deep ocean layers suggests that the ocean is warming from the bottom up. The ocean warming provokes an increase in the strength and number of hurricanes. The year 2020 has broken all records for the frequency of hurricanes and tropical cyclones on the planet over the entire period of observation. Due to increased humidity and rising temperatures, the intensity and number of tornadoes is increasing. Since the 1990s, the number of tornadoes in Europe has increased tenfold and continues to grow. Tornadoes and hurricanes can destroy entire residential districts, and they don't care if people are hiding there or not. Over the past 33 years, there has been an increase in the number of storms, wind speeds, and wave heights in the oceans are rising, and a significant acceleration of sea currents has been observed. According to NOAA, the number of floods in the U.S. has increased by about 100% over the last 30 years. At the same time, they began to occur synchronously, hitting several countries at once. Since 1998, floods have affected more than 2 billion people worldwide. The rate of loss of the Greenland ice sheet over the past 30 years has increased 20 times and exceeds the maximum rate of the last 12,000 years. Numerous studies indicate that the cause of melting of glaciers is the increase in geothermal flow. That is, heat from the bowels under the Greenland ice sheet. Over the last 30 years, the rate of ice melting in Antarctica has increased by 65%. Moreover, this is happening only in the western part of Antarctica, where there is a huge magma chamber and 140 volcanoes, the heat of which melts the ice from the bottom up. Despite the fact that high mountain glaciers are melting, lakes and rivers around the globe become shallow, and water escapes into the depths through cracks. According to research by American scientists, water levels in the world's largest rivers have dropped significantly over the last 50 years. Around the world, thousands of water bodies disappear, but at the same time there are powerful downpours. For example, in China, despite frequent floods, more than 28,000 rivers have disappeared in the past 20 years, roughly half of all the country's rivers. The number of extreme fires is growing, and they do not cease even in winter. Nowadays, on average, 7 times as many large wildfires occur in the western United States every year as there were 40 years ago. Even the Arctic is already burning, with 2019 seeing the largest and most destructive fires in the Northern Hemisphere in 10,000 years. Fires occur in areas where the Earth's crust is fractured and where hydrogen, methane, and other combustible gases emerge from the subsurface. Because of that, fire cannot be put out. It incinerates cities, leaving scorched areas for years. More and more often, people lose their lives in fires or suffocate from the smoke.
Well, all of these things that you named, they are all caused by global warming, which is the result of the increase in greenhouse gases caused by the combustion of hydrocarbons. Humans are to blame.
Climate change due to CO2 emissions is negligible because the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere is negligible. The concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere is 0.04%, while anthropogenic CO2 is 0.0004%. How can 4 molecules per million that humans add to the atmosphere cause global climate change? The rise in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is a consequence, not a cause, of rising temperatures. Natural sources emit much more CO2 than humans. The main source of CO2 is the ocean, heated by intense magmatic processes on its bottom. The amount of CO2 emitted by the biosphere is also rapidly increasing. Trees have started to mutate, now emitting CO2 instead of absorbing it. In the last decade, the Amazon forest emitted almost 20% more carbon dioxide than they absorbed. And in Siberia, larches also began to emit CO2 into the atmosphere in the late 1980s. As a result, for the past 15 years, forests have been supplying it just as intensely as industry. Along with the forest, swamps began to emit CO2 as well. So the accumulation of CO2 is taking place at an increased rate in a natural way. The reaction of the biosphere and the ocean is a response to activation of the planet due to the 12,000-year cycle. Abnormality of the current events is confirmed by the period of the so-called Holocene optimum that occurred 6,000 to 9,000 years ago, when temperatures on the planet were 3 degrees higher than nowadays. However, there was no such a powerful emission of CO2, mutation of plants, and growth of cataclysms. Now the heating is happening from inside the planet.
I am not convinced. It's all man-made.
I agree that humans have no effect on climate change. But wait, what's that internal heating about? The sun is a major factor in climate change.
The present-day climate change is characterized not only by an increase in global temperatures, but also by an increase in seismic and volcanic activity, which is many times more serious. Since the 1990s, the energy of earthquakes has increased significantly. The number and magnitudes of earthquakes are increasing. The seismic activity in the Pacific Ring of Fire has increased 2.5 times between 1990 and 2021. The number of earthquakes at the ocean bottom, on the boundaries of plates along the mid-ocean ridges, is growing. All over the Earth, underwater and surface volcanoes are actively awakening. The growth of volcanic activity is recorded by the volume of erupted lava. 90% of active volcanoes are located in the Pacific Ring of Fire, and their activity is increasing every year.
All these earthquakes and eruptions are also caused by humans. As a result of global warming, the glaciers are melting. The load on the Earth's crust is decreasing. That's why the crust cracks and lava pours out.
This is a mistake. Firstly, there are no glaciers in the Pacific Ring of Fire, which could increase seismic and volcanic activity there. Secondly, despite their high speed of melting, glaciers have not yet melted completely. Moreover, on the contrary, they are melting right where magmatic activity is increasing, but not everywhere, as would happen due to melting from the surface. And finally, how can CO2 emissions cause deep focus earthquakes at a depth of 700 kilometers, which have disastrously increased in recent decades? According to seismologists, such earthquakes were considered to be impossible because at such depths, rocks are supposed to experience only plastic deformations. Since 2014, an increase in earthquakes at depths of more than 700 kilometers has been recorded. And in 2015, scientists detected an earthquake 751 kilometers beneath Japan, which was the deepest earthquake in the entire history of observations. Something anomalous has started happening in the Earth's mantle. Humans couldn't have affected the Earth's magnetic field in any way either. In 1995, a sharp acceleration of the North magnetic pole drift speed by 3.5 times was recorded, from 15 kilometers to 55 kilometers a year. The electromagnetic field is generated by the dynamo mechanism in the Earth's core. Therefore, it is obvious that changes in the magnetic field indicate changes in the core.
I agree about the magnetic field, but regarding the growth of seismic and volcanic activity, I'm doubtful. First of all, along with our progress, the number of seismic sensors has increased. Algorithm of data processing became more advanced. That's why we see their increase. As for volcanoes, it's just that the human population on the planet has increased, so there are more of those who observe volcanic eruptions.
That's an understandable point, but in this case, the increase in seismic activity is reflected objectively. According to experts, there was a significant leap in the number of installed seismic sensors on the planet approximately in the 1970s. Since then, their number hasn't changed significantly. While there is an increase in the number of powerful earthquakes, their magnitude is growing, and deep focus earthquakes began to occur. The increase in the number of sensors makes it possible to observe only an increase in the number of small earthquakes. Meanwhile, earthquakes with magnitudes over 4 are registered all over the planet at all seismic stations, regardless of where it happened in the world. Moreover, the increase in the number of strong earthquakes with magnitudes over 8 in the last 20 years has nothing to do with the way the data are processed. The same may be said about deep focus earthquakes. Since the first event of this kind was detected in the 1970s and up to the present day, there has been a significant increase in the depths and magnitudes of such earthquakes. Similarly, volcanoes have been observed from satellites since the late 1980s of the last century. In other words, since that time, all eruptions have been clearly visible from space. The world's population is growing in places where there are no volcanoes or very few of them. But where there are many volcanoes, the population doesn't grow or it even decreases. The number of volcanic eruptions is increasing statistically, and not because more eyes are looking at those eruptions.
If we accept your arguments, then what caused all this?